A prominent US Republican pollster has claimed that Donald Trump does not like Kevin Rudd, warning Anthony Albanese to sack him as our ambassador to the US. Brent Buchanan says Mr Rudd is, quote, one of the biggest issues, unquote, when it comes to securing a face-to-face meeting between our PM and Mr Trump, adding, we need to find an Australian that Donald Trump likes. Ambassador Rudd has previously described the US president as a village idiot and traitor to the West. For their take, let's bring in Daily Telegraph journalist James Willis and founding director of Western Sydney Women, Amanda Rose. Morning to both of you. James, do you believe this?
I do. I think it's having an impact. It might not be the difference between securing the meeting or not, but I think Donald Trump is the kind of person that would remember these comments. He was made aware of them with an interview that he did last year, so he knows firsthand what Kevin Rudd has said about him previously. And if that is impacting us getting a meeting to discuss tariffs, which impacts jobs and our exports and everything else, well then it's the kind of thing the Prime Minister needs to be prioritising front and centre. And if it means Kevin Rudd can't stay in the job, then so be it. Because as of this point in time, the Prime Minister and Donald Trump have spoken on the phone, but they haven't been able to have that meeting. And let's face it, under Malcolm Turnbull, we got that meeting. We got an exemption from the tariffs. Joe Hockey was a far better ambassador. This time around, we're having some issues.
OK, we've got the Prime Minister on later. He will say, like all his ministers are saying, Amanda, Donald Trump got in, then we had an election, there wasn't an opportunity.
Oh, that's ridiculous. So just remember, though, Kevin Rudd, this is his sole purpose in the job. He's not having to run countries. He has to build a relationship with the US. That is it. So insulting Trump is probably not what you want to do if your entire career or your job is based around having a relationship with him, right?
That did happen quite a few years ago.
But still, he shouldn't. Like, it's just horrific that this type of person can get a role like that. Right. I'd say bring Joe Hockey back, right? I think he did a brilliant job.
I think he seems to be doing quite well on his own.
I know, but I mean, we need him. What I'm saying is we need him. But, you know, I don't, like, whether you like Trump or not, I understand why he feels that way with Kevin Rudd. Kevin Rudd had an issue with building relationships here, let alone overseas. So I do think it would be wise to replace him.
OK, we'll ask the Prime Minister exactly that question a little bit later after 8 o'clock. Moving on, older Australians have been asked on the street to offer their advice to young people about housing and the property market. Take a look.
I suppose you should save. When you have a property, it makes a big difference when you get a bit older. Now that I'm retired, I don't have to pay rent or anything like that, so rent is just waste. You're better off buying a property and paying that amount to eventually own it.
Another person encouraged young people to not go out to eat so much. James, you're laughing.
I think it's a very narrow view of how things are, and the reality is there's a lot of people that are in highly qualified jobs in Sydney now and Melbourne and other capital cities that simply cannot afford the 20% deposit. There's friends of mine that have had to move to, you know, regional towns or, you know, at least that middle ground, Newcastle, the Central Coast, just because Sydney is just way too unaffordable. Now, in saying that, I do think there are a lot of members of Gen Z that want everything now and they're impacted by social media and marketing, and they love the high-end purchases and, you know, the Gucci sunnies and all that sort of thing, and, you know, the fancy holidays. But it's very, very hard for young people to crack into the market, and the gap between wages and what the deposit is growing every year, and a lot of elderly people, or from that generation, do not understand that, I don't think.
Yeah, Amanda, the percentage of your wage that you need to pay off a house is very different to the percentage of your wage that you needed many years ago, isn't it?
It is. And look, just saying, you know, don't rent, use that money for a mortgage as a generic piece of advice is quite traumatic for people who can't get a deposit to actually get into the market. But there is some wisdom in the sense of we do have a generation. Personally, I see them all the time in programs that I run. They don't have the type of resilience that they did a while ago. Yes, there's a big difference with the prices of properties and entering the market, but if they don't get their, you know, $8 coffee, and if they don't get their takeout every night, and if they don't get what they want as they want it, they feel like they're missing out. I think there's a gap to be filled there where the government needs to come and increase supply with housing to take off the pressure, yes. But also we need to make sure that people aren't being conditioned to get what they want when they want and then complain if they can't get it. Yes, it's tough. I know it's tough personally, but it's just we can't have a generation of saying, yeah, but I want all these things as well. I want everything.
Have people given up, though, when I think you need something like $250,000 to afford a house in Sydney nowadays? Have young people sort of gone, I just cannot do that. That's not going to happen. So I am going to go and buy the sunglasses and go to Europe.
I think if you do the maths on like a $2.5 million house, which as we know isn't a lot of money in Sydney these days, and you say, right, this is the deposit I've got for me and my partner, and then you look at the repayments for the next 30 years every month, and you look at the interest you're paying, and it's like you might be able to afford that, but what quality of life are you having off the back of that?
Having a holiday in the backyard.
Well, exactly. So, you know, it's forcing people to not buy houses or to just buy apartments or smaller townhouses. So, sadly, for a lot of people, that Australian dream is over. And you're right, I think people have made a decision to either move out of Sydney, or they might say, look, we're going to rent in Sydney and buy properties in other parts of Australia and then sort of make our money back that way.
And you know what our parents would say? They never travelled. They didn't go out for dinner. They cooked at home. They bought cheap cuts of meat and they made their stew. Yeah. That's how they ate.
But look, that's true in this section, right? But also I have a friend who's a buyer's agent, and, you know, the amount of money that the cost of apartments and houses is ridiculous. Yeah. And the thing is, people do have to go regional. People do have to think outside of what they originally wanted. You know, if you wanted a house, now you got to look at an apartment. If you wanted Sydney, you have to go into the outskirts, or, you know, even Western Sydney, because that's becoming popular because people have moved out there. So people kind of need to look at different options instead of, I have to live in this particular area, because it's absolutely unaffordable and supply is not going up anytime soon.
And look, the Iconic didn't used to exist back then, and, you know, other online sites. I mean, it is hard now, really.
Yeah, I can see you're a shopper.
When you've got 30% off all pants.
How well dressed you are. Like, I can see that's a new shirt, James.
Gucci sunnies in
there. Yeah, your mum told me. Finally, new telco data has found that 1.2 million Aussie adults aged between 18 and 30 still having their phone bills paid off by their parents long after they left home. 65% of parents say they are happy to do it. Maybe they have no choice. James, we know your mum sometimes does your washing. We have been told we have that on very good authority.
Once a year,
and your ironing. Does she pay your phone bill?
No, but there was one horror incident that I'm getting flashbacks to because remember previously there was no caps on data, and so your data, if you spent over your data cap on your phone, and the bill was $1,200 for the month, and I couldn't pay it, and Mum picked up the check.
Have you paid her back since?
Absolutely.
Okay,
of course.
good. Just checking.
With interest?
No, it was a very lucrative deal.
I hope you took her out for dinner.
And I do regularly, and she would account to that.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Amanda.
Well,
what do you think? You pay your phone bill?
Of course I do.
I would expect nothing less, I can tell.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
So what I think is interesting is that the data says that people that are 30 have their parents paying their bill. And my logic is, if you're 30 years old and you need your parents to pay your phone bill, I think you need either a smack at the back of the head or to go for a financial literacy program to understand that it's not your parents' responsibility at the age of 30 for them to pay your phone bill.
It might just be going to Mum and Dad's house still, and, you know, sort of you need to get it redirected, and in the meantime it
might be on a family plan, and I can understand that to get discounts, but pay them for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or be a grown-up and have your own contract.
Yeah.
Yes. Agreed. 1 out of 10 said the parents don't notice. The parents notice. We know. Just reminding everyone. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
No worries.
Here's David.